While I had a car accident, my husband changed the locks. He didn't know the deed was already in my name. I didn't realize anything was wrong until the key didn't turn. I stood outside our front door, my right arm still in a sling from the accident, staring at the lock like it had betrayed me. I tried again, slower this time, careful. Same resistance. The key no longer worked. I looked around, expecting to see neighbors peeking through windows or someone walking by. But it was just me, the late afternoon sun, and the soft click of a lock that no longer recognized me. I rang the doorbell once, then again. Nothing. I knocked, the sound flat against the wood. Still silence. A cold dread started rising through my chest, creeping slowly like wet cement. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. It was a text from Daniel. "You'll need to stay somewhere else. It's better this way." I stared at the screen, blinking. I reread the message 3 times before it fully landed. I wasn't welcome. My husband had changed the locks while I was recovering in the hospital. No explanation, no warning. Just a line of text and a locked door. I didn't know whether to scream or laugh. I leaned back on the steps, breathing shallow, heart racing, the soreness in my shoulder returning with every pulse. I hadn't even told my sister I was out of the hospital yet, mostly because I didn't think she would care. But it wasn't her I thought of in that moment. It was Benjamin. I hadn't seen my brother in almost 6 years, not since the funeral of our mother. We had shared a long hug that day, said we would stay in touch, and then never did. I sent him a Christmas card once, didn't get anything back. He moved to Michigan, married someone named Lisa, had a baby girl, or at least I thought he had. No updates, no photos, nothing. Just distance, silence, and then nothing at all, and now he was dead. That morning, a coworker had mentioned a name in the obituaries. I hadn't even known he had passed. I searched it up during my lunch break, scrolling until I saw his face. Same wide eyes, same slightly crooked smile, but the dates below were impossible to ignore. Benjamin Thomas Whitmore, 1979-2023. I hadn't cried when I saw it. Not at first. I was in shock. The details were minimal. He died in his sleep. There would be a memorial service on Sunday at St. Agnes Church, west side of town. That was 2 days from now. I didn't know what else to do, so I just showed up. Alone. I didn't recognize anyone at first. The pews were filled, the organ played softly, and I sat in the back, unsure if I belonged. I kept scanning the room for familiar faces, but most people were strangers. Until I saw her. Lisa. She was sitting in the front row, wearing a simple black dress, her hair pulled back tightly. Next to her sat a girl no older than 6, fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. I felt something twist in my chest. My niece. My niece I had never met, never spoken to, never even seen a picture of. When the service ended, people started gathering, in small groups, exchanging quiet words and long hugs. I waited until Lisa stood alone near the entrance before I approached. Her eyes met mine, and I saw confusion first. Then something colder. "Lisa," I said, unsure what else to say. She tilted her head slightly. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" "I'm Emma, Benjamin's sister." The way her face changed at that moment will stay with me for the rest of my life. It wasn't surprise, it was shock, and then disbelief. "His sister?" she repeated. I nodded. "I only found out yesterday, about him passing. I wasn't contacted." She blinked. I didn't even know Ben had a sister." That sentence shouldn't have hit as hard as it did, but it felt like someone punched the breath out of me. Not because she meant to be cruel, but because it was real. My own brother never told his wife about me, never showed her a photo, never mentioned my name. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Lisa looked past me, murmured something about checking on her daughter, and walked away. I left the church and sat in my car for almost 20 minutes before I could turn the engine on. How had it come to this? My husband locked me out of my home. My brother erased me from his life, and I was too tired to fight any of it. But I wasn't going to let it end there, because there had to be a reason why Benjamin never told them, a reason why I was left out, a reason why no one even remembered I existed, and I was going to find it, even if it meant facing everything I had tried so hard to forget. I barely slept after Catherine left. Her words kept looping in my mind, and even though I didn't want to admit it, part of me understood her confusion. James had built a fragile image of himself that depended on my absence. Now that I was back, everything he'd constructed was beginning to crack. The next morning, I stared at my reflection in the guest bathroom mirror for a long time. My eyes were tired, rimmed with the weight of old wounds resurfaced, but my expression was steady. I'd come here to stand tall. I wasn't going to fold now. Downstairs, my mother was already in the kitchen. She was dressed in soft gray slacks and a cream blouse, simple but elegant. "Coffee?" she asked, her tone light, as if the night before hadn't happened. "Please," I said, sitting at the breakfast table. She poured 2 cups and sat across from me. "Your father's still resting. The doctor said he needs a few quiet days." I nodded. There was a pause before she added, "Catherine's still at the guest house. She hasn't spoken to James since yesterday morning." I sipped the coffee, letting the silence stretch. Finally, I asked, "Does she know I'll be staying through the weekend?" "She asked," my mother said. "And I told her the truth, that you're not going anywhere." It was strange hearing my mother back me up. I wondered how long she'd been carrying that quiet rebellion inside her, too afraid to speak, too tired to fight. But something had shifted. Maybe it was age, maybe it was regret. The rehearsal dinner had done its damage, but I knew the actual ceremony would still go forward. Martial pride rarely allowed for public failure. I wasn't naive enough to believe this family would change overnight. But I wasn't going to disappear again just to make things easier for them. Later that day, I walked to the west side of the estate where the florist team had returned to repair the damaged arrangements. I wasn't trying to interfere, I just needed air. I passed a group of caterers reviewing their checklist, a band doing a sound check under a white canopy. Everything looked perfect on the surface. "Judge Marshall." I turned. Catherine stood behind me, still in yesterday's sundress, hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. "I hope you don't mind," she said quickly. "I needed to clear my head too." "Not at all," I replied. "You're allowed to be anywhere you want today." She smiled faintly, then walked beside me down a gravel path toward the garden. "I didn't sleep either," she said after a moment. "I kept thinking about that conversation yesterday, and everything you've been through. I didn't know what to say, so I let her keep talking. I used to imagine James's family as this shining dynasty. Tradition, excellence, discipline. He made it sound so noble." I raised an eyebrow. "And now? Now I'm trying to figure out how much of it was real and how much was performance. He built that narrative to protect himself, but it was still a lie. And I don't know how to move forward when the foundation is cracked." We reached a bench near the fountain and sat. "Do you love him?" I asked. Catherine didn't answer right away. "I did. Maybe I still do. But love isn't supposed to come with conditions, is it?" "No," I said. "It isn't." She exhaled slowly. "I'm not sure the wedding will happen." I nodded. "Whatever you decide, make sure it's your decision. Not his. Not mine. Yours." She looked at me then. Really looked at me. "Why are you still here, Eleanor?" The question surprised me. "I'm here because for the first time in years, I don't feel ashamed of what I've built, and I'm not going to let them erase me." She didn't respond, but I saw it in her eyes, the understanding. The same kind of fight I'd had to learn alone. That evening, the guest house was silent, James nowhere to be seen. I walked the halls of the estate slowly, passing portraits of ancestors I barely knew, symbols of a family that had valued reputation more than truth. My mother was in the parlor, speaking in low tones with Aunt Susan, who glanced at me and immediately lowered her voice. I didn't care. Later that night, Maya called. "How's the battlefield?" she asked. "Explosive," I answered. She laughed. Good. That means you're doing something right. As I hung up, I opened my grandfather's watch again. I traced the initials engraved inside the lid. WJM. The soft tick of its movement filled the quiet of the room. I remembered how he used to say, "Time tells more truth than people ever will." The next morning, I received a message from James. Just 5 words. "Can we talk today?" Alone. I stared at it for a while before replying. "Meet me at the pond. Noon." When I arrived, he was already there, sitting on the same wooden bench we used to share as children. He stood when he saw me. "You came," he said. "You asked." He sat again, and I joined him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "I was wrong," he said finally. "I told Catherine you'd left because you couldn't handle it. I said you were unstable. I said you failed." My hands tightened in my lap, but I didn't interrupt. "I needed you to be the one who lost," he continued, "because it made my choices feel right. If you succeeded on your own path, it meant maybe I wasn't brave enough to find mine." I looked at him. He looked tired. Not just physically, but deeply tired in that way. Only people who've kept up appearances for too long become. "You hurt me," I said, "and you let them believe I was broken." "I know," he said, "and I'm sorry. It wasn't enough. It never would be. But it was something." "I want to try to be your brother again," he said, "if you'll let me." I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just nodded once and stood. As I walked back toward the estate, I realized that some wounds don't close. With apologies. They scar. But even scars, eventually, fade into skin. That night, the final decision about the wedding was made. Catherine called it off. The guests would still be fed, the venue still paid, but there would be no ceremony. Somewhere, between grief and relief, the family retreated. My mother didn't cry, my father didn't rage, and James didn't argue. He simply accepted it. And I stayed. For the dinner, for the aftermath, for myself, because this time, I wasn't the one walking away. I went back to the church on Monday morning. There was no one there. The front doors were unlocked, but the lights were dimmed, and the silence hung heavy in the empty sanctuary. I sat in the same pew I had the day of the memorial and stared at the altar, half expecting Benjamin to walk in and sit beside me. That didn't happen, of course. The silence only grew heavier. I wasn't there to pray. I came because I didn't know what else to do. I needed to understand how things had gone so far that my own brother had cut me out of his life. I kept going back in my mind, replaying our last real conversation, a phone call, years ago. He had been distant, distracted. He said things were complicated and promised to call again. He never did. A janitor passed by, pushing a mop bucket slowly, and nodded politely. I asked him who I could talk to about Benjamin's personal belongings. He pointed me to a small office at the back of the church. The woman inside, older and sharp-eyed, said Benjamin hadn't left much with them. Just a couple of programs for the service and some printed photographs his wife had brought. "Did he keep a journal?" I asked. She frowned. "Not that I know of, but his office was in the old garage behind their house. If anything personal still exists, it would be there." That night, I sat in my motel room, staring at the ceiling. My thoughts bounced between anger and confusion. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to ask why he let them erase me from his story. But mostly, I wanted to know who he had become without me. I texted Lisa. She didn't respond. I wasn't surprised. The next morning, I drove to their house. A modest one-story home on a quiet street with trimmed hedges and a blue mailbox. I parked across the road and waited until the lights turned off inside. Lisa must have taken their daughter to school. I walked up the driveway and followed the path to the detached garage in the back. It wasn't locked. Inside was a mix of clutter and order, books stacked in corners, old vinyl records leaning against a wall, a desk in the center, covered with paper, pens, and framed photos. Dust coated everything. The air was still. I didn't touch anything at first. I just looked. There was a picture of Benjamin and Lisa at their wedding, one of them holding their daughter as a baby, and then, one I didn't expect, a picture of me and Benjamin from when we were kids. We were sitting on the porch of our childhood home, legs crossed, popsicles melting in our hands. That picture shouldn't have been here, but it was. I picked it up slowly, staring at the faces. He had kept this. I opened the top drawer of the desk. Inside were more photos, some recent, some old. One envelope caught my eye. It had my name written on the front. Just Emma. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was a letter, just a few lines, written in Benjamin's handwriting. Emma, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I wish things had been different. I wish I had fought harder to stay in your life. But I got tired. I got scared. And I didn't know how to fix things. I never stopped thinking about you. I just thought maybe it would hurt you less if I stayed away. That was wrong. I'm sorry. B. That was it. I sat in the chair and held the paper in my lap. The words felt small, but they filled the entire room. All the silence between us suddenly made sense. He had been ashamed. He had convinced himself that his absence was mercy. It wasn't. It had been a wound that never closed. I didn't take anything else from the room. I left the photos, the memories, the dust. I folded the letter and put it in my coat pocket. When I turned to leave, I saw Lisa standing at the back door. She didn't look angry, just tired. You found it, she said. I nodded. He wrote that a year ago. He never had the courage to send it. Why didn't he tell you about me? I asked. Lisa stepped inside the garage, arms crossed. He did, eventually, a few months after we got married. He said you were the only person who really knew him. That scared him. I leaned against the desk. Why didn't you ever reach out? She hesitated. He asked me not to. He thought you wouldn't want to hear from us. I looked away. I didn't mean to keep you from the service, Lisa added. I just didn't know how to include you. I didn't know who you were to him anymore. I didn't either, I said. We stood in silence for a while. What will you do now? She asked. I don't know. Maybe get some answers. Maybe meet my niece. Lisa nodded slowly. She doesn't know much about you, but she's curious. I'm not trying to disrupt your life, I said. You're not. You were part of his life, whether he wanted to face it or not. I left the garage with the letter in my pocket. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was something I hadn't had in a long time, a piece of truth, and now I knew where to begin. I met her the next afternoon. Lisa called and said Mia wanted to ask me something. I didn't know what to expect. I was nervous, and part of me wondered if this was a mistake. But I agreed to come over. The house felt different this time, less like a stranger's home. Mia opened the door before Lisa could, holding a notebook against her chest. Hi, she said. Hi, I replied. She stared at me for a second, then stepped aside to let me in. Lisa stood behind her, arms crossed but calm. We were just about to start lunch. You're welcome to join, she said. I nodded. Thank you. We sat at the kitchen table. Mia didn't say much at first, just picked at her sandwich and peeked at me from under her bangs. After a few minutes, she placed the notebook on the table and slid it toward me. It was filled with drawings, crayon portraits, scenes of houses, animals, one that looked like a family of 3 standing in front of a tree. She pointed to one drawing. That's Dad, she said. That's Mom. And that was supposed to be someone else, but I didn't know who. I looked at her. What made you draw that? She shrugged. I heard them talking about you once. Dad said you used to read with him under a big tree, and he said he was sorry you were gone. I swallowed hard. Lisa stayed quiet, watching us, both. I turned the pages carefully. On the last one, Mia had written a short sentence in big block letters. Are you my aunt? I nodded. Yes, I am. She smiled slightly. Do you know how to braid hair? I do, I said. We moved to the living room floor, and she sat cross-legged in front of me. Her hair was soft and light. I hadn't braided anyone's hair in years. The last time was probably with Benjamin, when he was little and let me practice on him while we watched cartoons. "Do you have any kids?" Mia asked. "No," I said. "Just me." "Do you live far away?" "A couple of hours." She was quiet for a bit. Then she said, "Can you come back?" I paused. "Would you like that?" She nodded. Later, Lisa offered me tea while Mia went to play outside. We sat in the kitchen again, and for a while neither of us said anything. "She's never asked about Ben's side of the family before," Lisa said. I wasn't sure how to answer, but "I'm glad she asked you herself." I looked at her. "You did the best you could." She didn't respond, but she seemed to appreciate it. "He used to sit in that corner," she said, pointing toward a worn armchair. "Every night, reading, thinking. Some nights he just stared at the wall. I think he carried a lot he never told me." "He did," I said. She hesitated. "Do you blame him?" "I did, for a long time, but not now. We all made choices. Some of his were bad, but he wasn't a bad person." Lisa nodded slowly. Before I left, Mia hugged me tightly around the waist. It caught me off guard. "You don't have to bring anything next time," she said. "Just you." That night, I sat in my motel room again. The letter from Benjamin was still in my coat pocket. I took it out and read it one more time. It still didn't make everything right, but it gave me a place to start. The next day, I drove to the town records office. I wanted to know what had changed in Benjamin's life after our mother died. Something had pushed him to shut the door. Maybe someone, maybe circumstances. I needed to see it clearly. The woman behind the counter was helpful. She found property records, changes in legal guardianship, a short list of known family members. "Looks like his emergency contact was his wife," she said. "Before that, it was your mother. Nothing else on file." That confirmed it. At some point, he had erased me from paper, not just memory, but the woman also gave me something else. A copy of a legal notice Benjamin had filed 6 years ago. A dispute over a financial issue with our Uncle Thomas. I hadn't heard from that man in over a decade. The notice listed me as a secondary witness. My name, my address at the time, but I had never been contacted. That meant Benjamin hadn't completely erased me. Someone else had stepped in. I left the office with a copy of the file and sat in my car for almost an hour. My mind was racing. Uncle Thomas. I hadn't thought about him in years. He was never kind. Always hovering around our parents' affairs, always managing things after they passed. He had been in charge of sorting the estate, and somehow he had taken over everything without question. Benjamin didn't like him. Neither did I. But we were young and grieving, and no one fought him. I started looking into him. Property transfers, business records, anything public. It didn't take long to find the first red flag. A piece of land that belonged to our parents had been quietly sold 6 months after their passing. Benjamin's name had been removed from the record 3 weeks before the sale. Mine wasn't on it at all. There was no legal explanation, no public dispute, just a signature from Thomas and a transfer. It was time to find out what else had been taken. The next few days were spent chasing paper. Public records, archived files, notarized letters. I pulled whatever I could find. It was tiring, not just the work, but the weight of every new piece I uncovered. The more I read, the more it became obvious that Uncle Thomas had played a bigger role than we realized. Benjamin had tried to fight him. Quietly, but persistently. 6 years ago, there had been a legal challenge over the house our parents left behind. Thomas filed a claim citing financial mismanagement and lack of adult supervision during the time Benjamin was living there alone. He used it to force a sale of the property, claiming debts that were never fully documented. I found scanned pages from court transcripts. Benjamin's responses were clear, but you could read the fatigue in his words. He didn't have a lawyer. Thomas did. The court sided with Thomas. There were mentions of me in that case too. References to my absence, the idea that I had moved on wasn't involved. There was no contact information listed, even though I had never changed my number. It was all intentional. Thomas made sure I stayed out of it, that I looked like I didn't care. I sat at a library table with all the documents spread around me. My hands were shaking, not out of rage, but because I could feel how far this had gone, how much Benjamin had tried, and how isolated he must have felt. I drove to Lisa's house that afternoon. Mia wasn't there, and Lisa greeted me with a tired smile. I showed her the papers. She read in silence, flipping slowly through every line. When she finished, she looked up. "He never told me any of this," she said. "I don't think he wanted you involved," I replied. "He probably thought it would pull you both down," she sighed. "Thomas still sends cards for Mia's birthday. I never thought much of it." "He's not harmless," I said. "He kept me out of Benjamin's life, on purpose. He wanted control of everything, and I think Ben gave up trying to stop him." We sat in silence. "You think he took more?" Lisa finally asked. "Yes. I think he still has something that belonged to our parents." Lisa walked over to a cabinet and pulled out a small box. Inside was a folder Benjamin had labeled "Important." It had birth certificates, insurance policies, a few handwritten notes, and one thing that stood out: a faded photo of our mother and father standing in front of a small storage facility. "I remember this place," I said. "It was near downtown. They kept some furniture and boxes there after we moved." "It still exists," Lisa said. "I drive past it on the way to work. I went there the next morning. The place was old but still operating. The woman at the front desk was polite but firm. "Do you have the unit number?" she asked. "Not exactly," I admitted. "But it was under my parents' names, Walter and Elaine Whitmore." She checked her computer. After a moment, she nodded. "There was a unit, yes, but it hasn't been accessed in over 5 years. Last activity was someone named Thomas Whitmore removing the secondary names from the file." I clenched my jaw. "Can I see the contents?" "You'd need proof you're the legal heir." I showed her my ID, the family documents I had printed. It wasn't enough. I needed court permission or a signed release. I left frustrated but not defeated. I drove straight to the county clerk's office. Filing a petition wasn't hard, but it would take time, weeks, maybe longer. I didn't have weeks, so I made a decision. That night, I called Thomas. He answered after the third ring. His voice hadn't changed, still slow, still measured. "Emma, it's been a long time." "Not long enough," I said. "We need to talk." "About what?" "About what you took. About Benjamin. About the storage unit." A pause. "I don't think that's necessary," he said calmly. "You erased me," I said. "From court files, from my parents' estate, from everything. You manipulated him." He chuckled. "You always did have a dramatic side. I have evidence, and I'm not going to let this go." Silence. "What do you want, Emma?" "The truth, and everything that belongs to us." "Then come see me. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. You know the address." He hung up. Lisa wasn't happy when I told her. "You shouldn't go alone." "I have to," I said. "This isn't about confrontation. It's about closure." But I didn't believe that. Not fully. Part of me wanted answers. The other part wanted him to feel something. Guilt, regret, fear, anything. The next morning, I arrived early. Thomas lived in a brick duplex outside of town. His car was in the driveway. I knocked and the door opened slowly. He looked older, his hair thinner, his face lined, but his eyes were the same. "You look just like your mother," he said. I didn't respond. We sat in his living room. I placed a copy of the court documents on the table. "I know what you did," I said. He leaned back. "Then you know it wasn't personal. It was survival. Your parents left debt, a mess. I did what had to be done. You stole from us. I preserved what I could. You think your brother would have handled it better? He was emotional. He didn't understand how the world works." And me? Why was I left out? Because you left. You ran off and cut ties. I figured you wanted no part of any of it. You decided that for me. He didn't deny it. I want access to the storage unit, I said. Today. He studied me. You really think there's something there? I think you've hidden a lot. Maybe not money, but pieces of us. Of who we were, he sighed. Then, slowly, he reached for a drawer and pulled out a key. Unit 107, he said. But don't expect some big revelation. It's just old boxes. I'll decide that, I said. I took the key and left. That afternoon, I opened the unit. The air was stale. Dust floated through the light. There were 5 boxes. One labeled Elaine, another Walter, and 3 others marked simply Home. Inside were photographs, letters, journals. One folder had Benjamin's name. Another had mine. Documents I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. At the bottom of the last box was a sealed envelope. It had both our names on it, Emma and Benjamin. I didn't open it. Not yet. I sat on the cold floor, holding the envelope in my lap. The room was quiet, but not empty. This was what had been taken, and now I had it back. I waited until I got back to the motel before opening the envelope. It was addressed to both me and Benjamin. The handwriting was my mother's. I hadn't seen it in over 15 years, but I recognized it immediately. Her careful script, the way she dotted her I's lower than most. Inside were 3 things: a letter, a photograph, and a page from an old family ledger. The photograph was of the 3 of A. Us, me, Benjamin, and our parents, in front of our old house. We looked young. Benjamin had his arms crossed, squinting into the sun. I was holding a notebook against my chest. Our parents looked tired, but happy. The ledger page was more surprising. It listed 2 savings accounts. One with Benjamin's name, one with mine. Small balances, notes written beside each, education fund, held in trust. The accounts had been real. I remembered my parents talking about them briefly after I turned 17. Then the conversation had stopped. After their death, no one ever mentioned them again. The letter was short. If anything ever happens to us, please know we tried to do what was right. These accounts are meant for your future. We wanted you both to have something to hold on to. Don't let anyone tell you you're alone. You are not love, Mom. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what I had recovered. Not the money. That wasn't the point. It was the acknowledgement, the intention, proof that we had been thought of, that we mattered to someone. The next morning, I made an appointment at the bank. It took time and paperwork, but eventually I got access to what remained. The balances were small. One account had been emptied years ago. Mine had less than $1,000. But that wasn't the point. What mattered was that Thomas had known about them. He had accessed Benjamin's, drained it, and never said a word. He never touched mine because he didn't have the right documents. I filed a report. The bank referred me to a fraud investigator. It might go nowhere. Too much time had passed. But I did it anyway. Not for the money, for the record. I called Lisa that evening and told her everything. I always knew there was something more, she said. Ben would get quiet around that time of year. I think he blamed himself for not doing more. He did everything he could, I said. He just didn't have anyone left to help him. Lisa paused. Do you want to come over for dinner? Mia's been asking about you. I accepted. Dinner was simple. Chicken and rice. Mia showed me a picture she had drawn of the 2 of us sitting on a park bench. Do you really live far away? She asked again. Not that far, I said. Could you move closer? Lisa looked up from the sink. I didn't answer immediately. I'm thinking about it, I said. That night, as I got into my car, Mia ran out with something in her hand. It was a small keychain, a plastic sunflower. You can keep it, she said, so you remember where home is. I drove back to the motel, with it sitting in the cup holder. The next morning, I packed my things and checked out. Before leaving town, I stopped by the cemetery. Benjamin's grave was simple. His name, his birth and death dates, and the words, beloved husband and father. I stood there for a long time. I didn't say much. I didn't bring flowers. I just stood. Eventually, I pulled the envelope from my coat pocket and placed the photograph on the ground beside the headstone. Then I left. I wasn't sure if I would ever come back. 2 weeks later, I signed a short-term lease in a town not far from Lisa and Mia, at Pi, small apartment, ground floor, quiet street. I found part-time work at a library and started organizing a community reading program. Mia came over on Saturdays. We read, we drew, we talked. She asked more questions about Benjamin. I answered what I could. I didn't pretend he was perfect. But I made sure she knew he had tried. One afternoon, Lisa invited me over and handed me a box. It had more of Benjamin's things, books, photos, notebooks. She said they belonged with me. Inside one notebook was a note. To Emma, I never told you this, but you were the reason I kept trying. Even when I gave up talking to you, I still heard your voice in my head, telling me to stand up, telling me to keep going. You always believed in me. I hope I earned it. Ben. I closed the notebook and sat with it for a long time. Later that evening, I took down the photo Mia had drawn and pinned it to my wall. I wasn't trying to replace the past. I was just trying to live in the present. And maybe, for the first time in years, I wasn't doing it alone.